Welcome back, and I hope you had such a great week leading your organization and supporting others to be successful at being leaders as well. Today is board meeting day in my school district, and for superintendents, that's such a high stakes and high pressure day. This is typically when a lot of sleep is lost and a lot of checking in is being done to make sure your organization is firing at all cylinders so that you can report good news back to the board and help them make some very critical decisions for that month to support a strong and successful school year. So today's board meeting day, and in part 2 of our 3-part board meeting episode, I'm going to talk about how to inform your internal employees about the upcoming hot topics and decisions that your school board of directors is going to be arriving to today. But the trick is informing your employees before the board meeting so they have a deep understanding of all of the decisions that will be made, ultimately alleviating stress, anxiety, and pressures. This is the key role of being a superintendent and representing your board, supporting your board, but also making sure that your employees have at least advance notice of key decisions that could potentially affect them. Welcome to SuperInsights. I'm so glad you're here. Let's go. Each week, over 1,000 people have watched our early episodes, and we're growing our improvement army, by about 25% in subscribers and followers each and every single week as well. Now, while that might not be YouTube viral numbers, we work in a very niche job in a very specific sector. There's only 13,000 superintendents across the United States of America. And so I'm just really pleased to have so many leaders and aspiring leaders in the public school system hungry to learn more and to just, see what a day in the life of a typical common public school district superintendent looks like, which is a very difficult job today. So thank you so much for watching and subscribing. Please share this with other aspiring leaders or leaders in your local network. I'm not a natural YouTuber, as you have probably deduced in this process. I'm far from a professional at it, but at the same time, in a very tough job, being a millennial, I just want to share some new school strategies that have proven results and hope that I can just help even just one person who might be struggling in this job, might be new to this job, and try to give them a new skill set or a new opportunity or a fresh perspective of how to empower their team and to ultimately turn their organization into one that's a thriving school district who can serve their community in the best ways possible. So this has been a great endeavor, and I'm so excited to see such positive feedback, and I'm excited to keep this thing going. But again, today is school board day. My superintendent cabinet is prepared and ready to present to the school board. The board chair and vice chair are fully briefed on the agenda items. They played a role in the creation of the agenda, and they have a deep understanding of each and every single bullet point. Plus, one additional board member who joined us for the board meeting planning breakfast also has a deep understanding of what we're attempting to accomplish. If you want to learn more about that, part 1 is all about the planning and preparation for the board meeting and board agenda. But now that that team is fully briefed and ready to go, it is now my responsibility to inform the entire organization before the board meeting about some of the hot topics and key decisions that are going to be discussed and ultimately voted upon. This is such a critical component, and I'm excited to share more about this with you today. One of the things I learned early in my career is how critical it is to inform employees before key decisions are made. Early on, I would either communicate big decisions to parents and employees at the same time, or sometimes the opposite order, inform parents first and then employees later. And each and every single time I did simultaneous communication or I communicated with parents first, I often got a lot of resistance, frustration, and negative feedback from our employees. And so I've always tried in the last few years, as I've learned and grown from some of my own mistakes, is ensuring that I intentionally have a process and a system established to make sure that our employees know about key decisions and are briefed and informed about key decisions prior to a public rollout. This ultimately gives them the opportunity to digest, think about, formulate their own opinions. But most importantly, like I talked about in the last episode, we have a rule between the board of directors team and myself: no surprises. And I also uphold this rule myself in my obligation to our employees. And that's ensuring that they also are never surprised about key decisions that are happening throughout our school district. And so the way that I've created a system to support this best-in-class communication is through what I call a monthly employee forum. Now, I did not invent this system, nor did I invent this strategy. I actually got it from a book called Hardwiring Excellence, which is written by Quint Studer. He's a phenomenal leader that comes from the medical industry. And one of the things that Quint Studer says is that leaders are so great at making decisions, but they are not great at communicating decisions. This is a book that I read each and every single summer just to make sure that I'm grounded in the evidence-based leadership framework. And as I ask our leaders to roll out this framework and process, I need to make sure that I'm grounded in that process as well. And so employee forums is something that I've taken from this book, and it has been wildly successful for me in my career as I communicate huge decisions and as I communicate keywords at key times for my organization. Each month, I host a Zoom meeting. We use Google Video because we're a Google school district. And this meeting is on the calendar of each and every single one of our employees inside the organization. It is live and it is done after the school day when all the kids have gone home, but it's still inside the contracted work hours. So instead of an end of the day meeting held by the principal, or instead of different times that's assigned by the school district, we ask people, we don't mandate it, we don't require it, we ask people to join this so that they can understand some of the hot topics that are going on. At the beginning of the day, I send out a Google chat to all employees and I tell them how excited I am to have this forum, how important it is for them to attend this forum, and then I also give the agenda items of some of the hot topics and key decisions that I'd like them to be aware of. Again, I know we've all hosted some type of employee forum or town hall or open house or coffee with the superintendent, but we always typically get low turnout when it comes to these types of events. And so I really do believe that if I can make these topics something that is of interest to them, I typically find more participation in those hot topic events. Just in full transparency, these employee forums usually have about 50% of our entire workforce's participation, give or take, through the various months that's there. But we have developed this and made this consistent in a way that people truly start coming to these things so that they can be briefed and that they can be informed on some hot topics. One of the key phrases I use in my communication to encourage people to join is I want people to be in the know, not in the gossip. And so even if 25% of your employees show up to something like this, or 10% at the beginning show up to something like this, at least you know that you have between 10, 20, and 15% of your workforce who not only understands what decision is going to be made, but they understand the why behind the decision that's going to be made. So when they're in the teacher break room, or they're in the copy machine room, or they're in various places where employees gossip and or talk about the hot topics of the school district, when something not completely accurate arises, you know that you've got people who can say, you know what, nope, I was at the employee forum, I heard what Dr. Carpenter said, and here's what we're actually doing, and here's why we're doing it, and here's how much it's going to cost, and here's where the money's coming from. And so this truly allows your entire organization to cascade critical information and key decisions, ultimately allowing your organization to be successful about, at minimum, understanding the why decisions are being made. Now notice, I didn't say they have to agree with the decision that is being made. Everybody is free to formulate their own opinion, but at least I have the opportunity to explain the decision and why we've made the decision, and people seem to have a better understanding of what's going on. They may not like it, it may impact them in an adverse way, but at the same time, they have an understanding of where we're coming from when making that decision. And this is one of the strategies that I use ultimately to improve the culture and the communication inside our school district, to build trust from the district office to different buildings, to build trust in the leadership, and also to have the opportunity to connect with our employees, especially when the going is tough. So in this meeting, I always start with a video that's been created by our communications team. And it's typically something that highlights a student activity or event, like a play or a sporting event, or some type of student activity, or it's some type of employee recognition. And being able to utilize those communication videos as people start to enter the virtual room is just an opportunity for people to sit back, watch. It's something that positively promotes the school district and the work organization. And it's positive in a way that, as you know, people who come into the Zoom and wait for the meeting to start, there's just kind of that awkward silence where people are looking at people's videos and everyone just kind of has a default waiting face as they're waiting for things to start. So our ability to start with a video always kind of creates a positive start to the meeting, and it's something that can entertain the employees as hundreds of people flow into this meeting with an opportunity to see some of the cool things happening inside our organization. I typically begin speaking in this meeting about 5 minutes after it was scheduled to start. There's always late people coming in, and I really want to give them the opportunity to come in, get themselves set up before I start hitting them with the big things happening inside our district and organization. But how I typically start is by harvesting wins. It is so critical to recognize the good work that's happening, because what gets recognized gets repeated. Harvesting wins is also a great opportunity to re-recruit your high-performing employees inside your organization. And so I typically take between 2 and 5 minutes to recognize various people inside our organization and specifically recognize the work and impact that they're making. This ultimately allows for a positive start. It recognizes the great things that people are doing inside our organization. And I know we always, as superintendents, get a lot of feedback about visibility, making sure that we're not in our leather chairs and being seen, not only externally in the community, but internally in the organization as well. But the thing that I've learned from my years of experience, which is only 7, but my 7 years of experience, is they don't actually want to see the superintendent out there. They want to be seen by the superintendent doing great things. And so I start every employee forum really recognizing the things that I've seen people doing and recognizing the hard work that I see our people doing each and every single day. Great way to start the meeting, and so important to intentionally develop the culture inside your organization, and the superintendent gets to play a role in that culture development. And then the rest of the forum is all about talking about the hot topics and the serious stuff, and this is live. The superintendent is the one giving the message and giving the delivery of the message, which is so critical. And I know that this is kind of a cautionary spot for superintendents. Superintendents don't necessarily enjoy being in the front lines in a vulnerable position, but I have found this to be so successful and so rewarding. And so as we talk about budgets, as we talk about funding, as we talk about layoffs or rifts or different employment stresses, as we talk about key decisions that the board is facing and may need to make decisions on, or even things inside the superintendent's desk or the superintendent's cabinet of key organizational decisions or framework decisions or behavior decisions, this is the place to discuss them. And so I go through each and every single agenda item. I talk about what's the problem. I talk about what the solution is going to be. And I support our solution with data and evidence and ultimately the why we're trying to move in this direction. But it's also critical to communicate in each and every single one of these what you predict will happen with this change. I think it's so important that employees can hear, because of this change, we think this problem will be fixed. And here's how we're going to monitor that change agent to make sure it's doing what we intend it to do. And our ability to be able to talk about that in front of our employees, my opportunity to be front and center to recognize the problem that people are communicating. Let's give an example of student behavior in classrooms. We've all read the articles about classrooms in crises, students in special education exhibiting behaviors that are harming, kicking, biting, spitting at teachers, all of the above. It's critical for employees to hear their superintendent say, I see it, I recognize it, here's what we're going to do about it, here's how I predict that change is going to be made, and here's how we will monitor it to see if additional adjustments are needed. This is a paramount conversation that is so much worth its return on investment for the leader to be front and center, recognize the problems, and communicate the issues. And then at the end, if there is time available, because remember, we're coming right up against the end of contract time, and I try my very hardest to make sure that I have a hard stop when it's time for people to clock out, because they have lives too. They have kids they need to pick up. They've got practices they need to drop their kids off to, and I completely recognize that. But if time allows, that's when I create either some type of feedback system, because the one thing I don't necessarily want is unscripted people raising their hands and asking questions and talking on this forum, because that I want voice, but that prolongs the meeting. This is a short and sweet meeting to just talk about hot topics, what the board's going to do, and ultimately other big issues that the superintendent is working on or working with. And so I typically have either some type of polling or survey system. We use something called Slido, which is a great piece where people can shoot the QR code on their phone. And this is where they can start to bring their voice in. And so this has turned into a great two-way communication between superintendent and employees, and the opportunity for the superintendent to understand what barriers might exist, what pressure points might exist, and how people are feeling overall about this change. As you know, some changes will be celebrated with hallelujahs and thanks for recognizing and let's move forward. Some changes and decisions are going to be met with full-on resistance. And this is why doing this work before the school board meeting allows you to have a better understanding of where your blind spots are. It allows you to have a better understanding of who might storm the school board room to fervently resist or rebuke the decision that the school board might be making. And so really, this is my last check prior to the school board meeting to make sure that everybody is informed of what's happening, but it also gives me the opportunity to measure how these school board decisions are going to be received from the internal part of the organization, and this allows me to prepare and plan accordingly to best support my board. Again, the employee forum is such a key communication device to make sure that our employees are not surprised by school board decisions or by superintendent decisions. And it's our best way to communicate that and keep the gossip to a minimum as you try to inform the organization about the why and the data behind these decisions. But again, this episode is all about preparing the board. And as the board's one employee, as their representative, as their lawyer, and also as their protector, this is also my final time to make sure that decisions that are going to be in front of them on camera, in public, unrehearsed, unscripted, that nothing is going to surprise the board prior to that meeting. And so if I get deep resistance from this employee forum or from various sources, either emails or from parents, etc., this gives me a better understanding to give them a heads up, like, hey, this decision is going to be hotly contested, or it's not as popular as I anticipated it would be, or there's some things inside this decision that have ramifications we didn't anticipate or think about. This ultimately gives me the best opportunity at success in the school board meetings so that when public comment comes to the board or something of that nature, I'm prepared, I anticipated it, I'm ready for it, and there are no surprises. And so I strongly recommend for you to try an employee forum. It's a very vulnerable spot for superintendents to be, but nothing is better than being front and center and being the true leader, because leaders go first and you have to model what right looks like for your principals and everybody else. And so this is such a critical component, led by the CEO of the organization. And you're really right there front and center to tell people, take your best shot. What is the toughest question you've got? What is something I haven't thought about in terms of ramifications of this decision? And allowing your employees to provide that voice also fosters co-ownership. It builds culture, and it allows your school board team to be as successful as possible, as at the end of the day, they make some of the toughest decisions inside this organization. And I'm so grateful to have a school board who is prepared and ready to tackle some of these doozies of decisions inside public education. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode today. Next episode is going to be all about the school board meeting itself. I hope you give this thing a try, and I hope it leads to the positive results that it's brought to me over my years of conducting these. Thanks for joining Super Insights. Subscribe, follow, and share with your friends. We'll see you next week.